Now, you broadcast on Woman's Hour, and within a couple of days you received a letter from Grace Stockham. How
Ye-
did you feel when you received that letter?
I felt very emotional. I had had many letters by that time, not only from Woman's Hour, from all over the world by then. But when I received that letter, something in me told me that there was something special, and I had to do my utmost to see what I could do to help. She came from Munich like I did, and I myself remember the orphanage where I spent several weeks when my mother had my younger sister, and people were sent, children were sent to that same orphanage. And I felt a kinship with her, and it went straight to the heart, what she wrote to me in her letter about not having any family, not really knowing who she was and what she was for the last 50 years. I wrote immediately, the same day, and within 5 days, I'd already received her second letter, and that's how it started.
She sent me a letter that she herself had received, indicating that there were possible files at the CBF. She had got one, so I thought, well, maybe there are files about us. So I wrote to the CBF. This took a little bit longer, and I don't think I got any files until about the middle of October. And I got files on Lottie and myself, and there was a little bit of information about my mother.
What information was that?
Well, there's a slip of paper that gives the date, the 30th of April 1943, a registration number, and says that she was a domestic servant. So from that we assumed, and that is the CBF and I assumed, that she had actually come to this country on that date. But I have now got information from the family that seems to make that rather unlikely.
I went to Israel a few weeks later, and my sister had arranged a broadcast like I had on Woman's Hour. And I did say to the producer, would he give me just half a minute, less than half a minute, I must broadcast one name, which I did at the very end. And I left Israel the day after, and my sister would arrange that broadcast, and she incidentally arranged all the transport, all the reunion transport from Israel. She had immediate response, and she phoned me up. I think I'd hardly set foot here back in England, and she said people are coming forward, and then I straight away told Susie that.
That broadcast was October the 13th, and then there was a letter which was written on October the 17th. I'll never forget receiving this letter because it's from a cousin in New York, and his name is Jerry. And he writes, "Dear Miss Bechhofer, if you are one of the daughters of Rosal Bechhofer, then you are indeed my first cousin." Golly, I thought. My father was Bernard Bechhofer, one of Rosal's eldest brothers. Your mother, and he's still questioning it, if she was that, was the next to the younger sister of 13 siblings. Golly, 13 siblings. Right, so he says, are you our cousin? If so, are you not one of the twins? Yes, I am one of the twins, I say, yes, yes. But then I have to wait, but not too long. I think I've probably written to him in the meantime. And I think it's about a week later I get a letter, a long letter actually, giving me a long family history, and it's a beautiful, wonderful letter. And he says, of course you are our cousin. It's very simple. Your mother was Tantal Rosal. We never called her Rosa. A very kind woman who did not have an easy life. And then the letter contains all that I ever want to know about my family. An enormous family tree. And suddenly, on this day, in November, I am Susie Bechhofer with a family.
What was he able to tell you about your mother that you didn't know?
Well, he wasn't able to tell me a lot. He writes, she's a very kind lady. She had a very hard life. And she perished along with 8 others of her brothers and sisters in the Holocaust. Sure.
And you had to tell him that, in fact, Lottie had died.
Mm.
When and how did Lottie die?
Well, Lottie had been ill for a long, long time. She became ill at the age of 7. And she had lots of major surgery and was never able to lead a normal life, in and out of hospital. And eventually she went to a Cheshire home and died at the age of 35.
So Susie was now Jewish, she had a family, and had come to the attention of the Jewish Chronicle.
Suddenly I'm Jewish, and then all of a sudden the Jewish Chronicle get involved, and they ring me up. And they say, can we do an interview? And I say, well, who are you? We're the Jewish Chronicle. Okay, that's fine. It didn't mean anything to me. Anyhow, Jenny Fraser, who's a wonderful journalist, came along and did a very moving piece in the Jewish Chronicle, which I know had quite an impact in the Jewish community.
It certainly had an impact on another refugee from Munich, Edith Moses, when she read the article in her apartment in Bath and recognized the 2 little girls in the photograph.
Well, I was very excited, very surprised, and I shouted out to my sister, I know these 2 children. And then I read the story to her, and I said, I must contact the Jewish Chronicle and tell Jenny Fraser, the editor, that I know Susie and Lottie, that I was there in the home when they were there.
What do you remember of the twins? Because actually they were only about 2, 3 years old.
2, just 2. I came in April 38, 1938, and there were going to be 2 in May 38. And they were the dearest little children. And I immediately became very, very fond of them, and so was everyone else. They were everybody's sweethearts.
You used to see Rosa, the girl's mother, on the stairs sometimes. Tell me about that.
Well, when I used to, I don't know how this would have happened. I was there, as I say, on Sundays, and she always seems to come on Sunday. On Sunday afternoon, about 5 o'clock. I usually used to go either to have a coffee with somebody, either in the kitchen with the cook or upstairs, or something like this. And I often saw her on the stairs, rushing out for the front door. And I used to just stand there, and I used to think to myself, lady looks so unhappy, and well, I just wanted to do something for her, and I couldn't.
Now, as far as you know, what happened to the twins?
Somebody set it going that the children should be adopted in America by an Orthodox family in California. And they had all the papers, or not all, but they had quite a great deal of papers by the time I left. And they said they had taken somebody on in the nursery, a Jewish girl, to get used to the 2, and then take them out to America and stay with the family until they were old enough to tell them the story and understand.
What was it like seeing Susie after all those years?
It was ecstasy. I stood here by the window and I waited for the taxi, and I watched her get out of the taxi, and I went down the stairs and I said, my darling little Susie, did I ever imagine I'd see you again? I just couldn't believe it. It was like a miracle.
Has there ever been a point when you've been afraid that this whole thing's going to take over and pull you apart?
That was a consideration, but I felt I couldn't prevent Susie from the path she was taking, and as it happens, it's all turned out extremely well.
How is Susie different from Grace?
I think Susie's very different from Grace because in many ways Susie's a little girl. Grace lived from 3 to 50. So I can't actually reject Grace. Parts of that time I reject quite a lot. And I really want to be Susie, perhaps because I wasn't very happy being Grace.
And what's the next step in your journey? What do you do now?
I think the journey will go on. There's a lot more to do. It's a very exciting journey. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful journey. Although it's very tough at times, it's tremendous to be on it. And I think it's important that Grace actually comes to terms with Susie and becomes integrated. Susie becomes integrated with Grace. I think this will happen, but not overnight. And then perhaps Susie Grace, or I think possibly Susie, has then got to get to know what being Jewish really means, and perhaps be able to pick up some of the threads that were put down 50 years ago.
What does being Jewish mean to you? What effect does it have on Grace, who's been brought up as a Christian?
I guess it has a profound effect. But at the end of the day, I think what I'm left with are two pictures. I've got Grace's picture of Christianity, which has been coloured in slowly as she's learnt about her Christian life. Different colours here, different shades there. And now I've got a brief sketch of what being Jewish is. And I feel that I've, in the future, got to paint this picture. But yet, at the moment, it's just a broad sketch. But I think what it's done to my Christian way of thinking is the shades are just different. I've changed the colours. What was important, perhaps, isn't quite so important. You could say the reverse. It's a very, very difficult thing for me to deal with.
And do you feel that God has somehow had a hand in bringing this about for you?
Most definitely. I see a very important hand that's been over all what has happened. Not only to me, but the whole of the family. The whole of the Beckhoff family.
Not a voice, but a person. Susie, and it's Ruth. So great to see you. Wonderful. Great to see you. And I'm Sonia.
Well, in November, Susie flies to Munich to continue the search for other members of her family.